The year was 1891, and the Arkansas frontier was still a place where the land looked older than the people who worked it. Along the winding banks of the White River, there stood a small wooden cabin, paint peeling, chimney crooked, garden half wild, but smoke curled from its chimney every dawn without fail. That was Clara May Whitlock's home, or what she called it, since her husband's passing 3 winters ago. The townsfolk called her the widow by the river. She wasn't old, not quite young either, just a woman weathered by loss, softened by time, and somehow made beautiful by both. Every morning before the roosters cried, she would light her wood stove, hum a hymn her mother used to sing, and knead dough by hand. The smell of baking bread drifted down the river road, and sometimes, just sometimes, a lost soul would follow that scent to her door. When they did, Clara May never turned them away. No one knew where she came from, or how she managed to live alone so peacefully. But everyone knew one thing. No matter who you were, if you came to her hungry, you left with a full belly and a warmer heart. Clara May's bread had a legend of its own. It wasn't fancy bread, just flour, lard, salt, and water baked in an old Dutch oven, but it tasted of something most folks had forgotten: comfort. Travelers who had been on the road for weeks swore her loaves never seemed to end. She always had another batch ready, no matter how many people she fed. One traveler once asked her, half joking, "Ma'am, how do you make enough bread for everyone?" She smiled gently, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. "Oh, honey," she said, "the good Lord has His ways of stretching what's given with love." She never accepted money. If anyone insisted, she'd point to the sign nailed above her door: "Leave your hunger, take only peace." In Hollow Bend, a town where everyone was scraping to survive, Clara May's generosity made her both admired and questioned. Some said her bread was blessed. Others whispered that no one could feed strangers without some hidden reason. But to the people she fed, her bread was hope in the shape of a crust. It didn't take long for whispers to start. "She's got to be hiding gold somewhere," muttered Mr. Turner, the shopkeeper, to his wife. "Or maybe she's feeding bandits. They say she takes in anyone," another added at the barber shop. Hollow Bend was a town that had learned to be suspicious of kindness. It was safer that way. A woman alone, giving away food in a time of shortage, seemed almost unnatural, but Clara May never joined in the gossip. On Sundays, she'd still walk to the church in her faded blue dress and sit in the last pew, hands folded quietly. She never looked ashamed, never looked proud, just peaceful. Even the preacher, Pastor Givens, struggled to make sense of her. "A generous heart is good," he said one Sunday, "but too much kindness can lead to ruin." Clara May just smiled when she heard. "Then let it," she said softly. "There are worse ways to be ruined." One blistering afternoon, as the sun scorched the Arkansas clay, a boy appeared on her porch, barefoot, rail-thin, dirt-streaked face. He looked no older than 10. Clara May opened her door, eyes soft with concern. "Lord bless me, child, where's your folks?" The boy looked down. "Gone," he mumbled. Without another question, she brought him inside. She ladled stew into a chipped bowl and handed him a slice of bread still warm from the oven. He devoured it like a starving pup. When he finished, he looked up shyly and said, "Mama said nobody helps for free." Clara May chuckled, brushing the boy's hair from his face. "Well, your mama never met me. All I charge is a smile." The boy grinned for the first time in months. He told her his name was Eli, and that he'd been walking from one town to another since his mother died. Clara May offered him a place to sleep near the fire, and from that day on, Eli never truly left. He became the son she never had, and she, the mother he had prayed for in silence. A week later, While Eli chopped wood outside, a shadow fell over the yard. A man dismounted from a tired-looking horse. A tall, rugged figure with a rifle strapped across his back and eyes that looked like they'd seen too many winters. He didn't smile. He didn't speak much either. Clara May greeted him anyway. "Come in, traveler. You look like you fought the road too long." Inside, he sat stiffly as she served him bread and stew. He ate in silence, only occasionally glancing up at her. When he was done, he reached into his coat and placed a silver dollar on the table. She pushed it back toward him. "I don't want your money, sir," he frowned. "You don't even know me." "I don't have to," she said kindly. "Hunger don't need a name." He stared at her for a long moment, something soft flickering in his tired eyes. Then he nodded, pocketed the coin, and left. But when he reached the river bend, he turned back to see her waving from the porch, a small figure framed by golden light and drifting flower dust. For reasons he couldn't explain, he tipped his hat to her before disappearing down the road. Soon, her kindness became the town's favorite subject. At a church meeting that spring, Pastor Givens raised a concern. "Brothers and sisters," he began, "we mustn't let blind charity weaken our community. It is written that he who does not work shall not eat." The crowd murmured in agreement until Anna Briggs, the young schoolteacher, stood up. "With respect, Pastor, I've seen what Miss Whitlock's kindness does. It doesn't make people lazy. It gives them strength to keep going." Still, suspicion lingered. When Turner's store was robbed that month, folks were quick to point fingers. "Bet the thief ate at her table first," someone spat. "Probably one of her strays." The sheriff, Tom Dalton, tried to calm them, but he, too, was curious what kind of woman risked feeding anyone who knocked. That evening, he decided to pay her a visit. The sheriff's horse stopped outside her cabin just as the sun dipped below the trees. The smell of stew filled the air, and Eli waved shyly from the porch. Sheriff Dalton removed his hat as Clara May greeted him. "Evening, Sheriff. Care for supper?" He accepted, though his eyes were cautious. Over the meal, he said, "Miss Whitlock, some folks are uneasy. You give too much away. There's men who'll take advantage." Clara May sipped her tea. "Then let them. Better a full thief than a starving one." The sheriff studied her. "You're a strange woman, ma'am. The world's crueler than you think." Clara May smiled. "Maybe so. But cruelty can't last long where kindness makes its home." He left that night puzzled and oddly humbled. As he rode away, he looked back to see her porch light glowing warm against the darkness. Winter came early that year. The Arkansas River froze solid. Snow fell in sheets, trapping families in their homes and cutting off supplies. But somehow, smoke still rose from Clara May's chimney. People trudged through the snow, farmers, travelers, even drifters with frostbitten hands, following that smoke like a beacon. And each one found her door open, stew bubbling, and a place by the fire. One night, a man collapsed on her porch, his face blue from cold. Eli dragged him inside. "Storm don't care who you are," Clara May said as she poured him hot broth. "So neither do I." That winter, many in Hollow Bend survived only because of her. Still, she asked for nothing. Some said she had a secret store of flour. Others whispered that heaven itself must be refilling her pantry. Only Clara May knew the truth. Every time she gave, something inside her filled instead of emptied. As the storm waned, a familiar figure appeared at her door, the man with the rifle. He was nearly unrecognizable, frostbitten, weak, barely holding himself upright. "Lost my horse," he rasped. "Been walking 2 days." Eli helped him in while Clara May wrapped him in quilts. She spooned soup into his trembling hands. "I didn't come for charity," he murmured. "I didn't offer charity. she replied softly. Just supper. He stayed 3 days while he recovered. In that time, he watched her with quiet curiosity, the way she sang softly as she cooked, the way she brushed Eli's hair from his eyes, the way she prayed before every meal. There was no fear in her, no judgment, only peace. He wondered how someone who had lost so much could still give so freely. On the third night, while she stepped outside to fetch water, the stranger's eyes fell upon a small wooden trunk beneath her bed. Something inside him, the part that had lived too long by suspicion, whispered, she must have money hidden there. He knelt, lifted the lid slightly, and froze. Inside were letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The top one read, "To my Henry, gone to heaven too soon." Curiosity gave way to guilt as he gently unfolded it. My dearest Henry, the war took you, and with you, the laughter from this world. But if I can feed one hungry soul in your name, maybe you'll live a little longer through the kindness I give. The stranger's throat tightened. He closed the trunk and whispered, God forgive me. When Clara May came back, he was staring into the fire, tears shining in his eyes. Everything all right? She asked. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. Everything's fine. But inside, he felt something break, and something new begin to grow. Winter's cruel wind howled through Hollow Bend, the night Clara May's life nearly ended. Eli was asleep by the hearth when the lamp on the kitchen shelf toppled over, shattering on the floor. Flames caught the curtains fast, hungry, wild, merciless. Eli, Clara May cried, yanking the boy up and pushing him toward the door. Smoke filled her lungs, her eyes stung, but she kept moving. Outside, the rifleman, the same man who had once robbed a store, heard the commotion. He sprinted from his tent by the woods, shouting for help. Fire! Fire at the widow's house! The townsfolk came running, buckets in hand, but by the time they reached the cabin, the flames had swallowed it whole. Clara May stood in the snow, barefoot, watching her home collapse in a spray of sparks. The sheriff held her shoulders. I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't save it. She nodded calmly, tears shining but her voice steady. It's only wood, Sheriff. Home's not walls. It's people. As dawn broke, all that remained was her bread oven, blackened but still faintly warm, like the heart of a woman who refused to go cold. By morning the snow had melted where the fire burned. The townsfolk, ashamed and heartbroken, offered what they could: clothing, blankets, tools. Even the gruff shopkeeper, Mr. Turner, brought flour and sugar. The rifleman built her a small canvas tent beside the ruins. You'll need shelter, he said. Clara May smiled gently. Don't fret, son. Maybe God thought my walls were blocking his view. Eli tried to salvage her baking tools from the ash. The Dutch oven was cracked, but Clara May cradled it like a treasure. Still good enough to bake in, she said. We'll just start again. And she did. That very evening under the open sky, she baked bread in that broken oven, feeding the very people who had once doubted her. It was as if the fire had burned away everything except her purpose. A few days later, while cleaning near the ruins, Anna Briggs, the schoolteacher, found a half-burned letter among the ashes. It was addressed in elegant handwriting. If kindness is all I have left to give, then I shall give until I'm gone. For my Henry died believing love was worth more than land. Anna brought it to church that Sunday, reading it aloud after service. The room fell silent. For years, no one had known how Clara May lost her husband. Now they learned he had died during the war between the states, a soldier buried far from home. She had come to Hollow Bend afterward, alone, with nothing but the promise she made to him, to never let the world harden her heart. From that day, the townsfolk's whispers changed. The same people who once doubted her began leaving flour, wood, and milk by her tent each morning. And for the first time in a long time, Hollow Bend felt something new, shame softened by grace. One evening, under a violet sunset, the rifleman approached her with trembling hands. His face was pale, his eyes haunted. "Miss Whitlock," he began, "I've got a confession." She looked up from her dough. "Go on, son." "I was the one who robbed Turner's store last year. I was desperate, and you fed me anyway. You didn't even ask my name." Clara May paused, wiping her hands slowly. "I knew you had hungry eyes. Didn't need to know the rest." He swallowed hard. "You should hate me." "Hate?" she whispered. "No, child. You already carried enough of that on your back. Maybe that's why God sent you here, to lay it down." Tears streamed down his face. For the first time since the war, he felt lighter. She handed him a loaf of bread, warm and golden. "Take this, and when you find someone starving, pass it on. That's how you pay me back." That night he couldn't sleep, not out of guilt anymore, but out of awe. The sheriff wanted to arrest the man once he heard the confession, but Clara May stepped between them. "Tom Dalton," she said firmly, "if you want justice, build it from mercy. The man's changed." "Changed or not, he broke the law," the sheriff argued. "Then let him mend it," she replied. "He can fix the bridge after the flood washed it out. The town needs it, and he needs a new start." The sheriff stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Over the next few weeks, the rifleman, now known simply as Mr. Brooks, worked every day rebuilding the bridge. Children brought him nails, farmers shared lunch, and slowly, the fear around him began to fade. When the bridge reopened, Clara May was there with fresh bread for everyone. "Look at that," she said. "A bridge rebuilt by broken hands. Ain't that something?" And Hollow Bend cheered. Kindness had become contagious. But kindness, though powerful, couldn't protect Clara May from time. By the spring of 1892, her body began to fail her. Her hands trembled when she kneaded dough. Her breath grew shallow, yet she refused to stop working. "Miss Whitlock, you need rest," said Anna, worried. "I'll rest when the hungry stop coming," she replied with a wink. Eli stayed by her side, now a young man of 12, fetching water and wood. "Don't you worry, Miss Clara," he said. "I'll take care of the bread." She smiled weakly. "You already do, Eli. Every smile you give is half the recipe." Even as her health faded, her laughter didn't. She hummed the same old hymn as she stirred her pot. "Shall we gather at the river?" And every evening someone new would knock on her door, because word of the widow who never said no had traveled far beyond Hollow Bend. One April evening, Clara May sent Eli into town with a message. "Tell everyone supper's on me tonight." The townsfolk came from miles around, farmers, shopkeepers, strangers from the road. Tables stretched through the meadow behind her tent, draped in patchwork cloth and lit by lanterns swaying in the warm breeze. She stood at the head of the table, frail but glowing, a shawl around her shoulders. "My friends," she said, voice trembling, "if I've learned anything, it's this: kindness feeds twice. Once for the belly, once for the soul." They ate and laughed and sang. Even Pastor Givens wept quietly as he blessed the meal. Eli watched her, noticing how she looked at everyone as though memorizing their faces. Her smile never faded, not even as her eyes grew distant, far away, like she was already half among the angels. That night, under the stars, she whispered to Eli, "Promise me something, child. Keep the oven warm." He nodded through tears. "I promise." The next morning, Anna Briggs came to bring milk, as she often did. The dawn light spilled gently across the meadow, touching everything with gold. Clara May's door was ajar. The fire was out. Inside, she found the widow sitting in her chair by the window, Bible on her lap, a peaceful smile frozen on her face. as though she'd simply fallen asleep between prayers. The note on the table read, "I leave nothing behind but what I gave away. May you find joy in the giving." The town wept. The bell at Hollow Bend's church rang all day, and even the river seemed to flow slower. Eli placed her cracked Dutch oven on her grave, whispering, "The oven's still warm, Miss Clara." Weeks later, while clearing what was left of her things, Anna found one last envelope in her trunk, addressed simply to Hollow Bend. She gathered the townsfolk and read it aloud. "If ever you doubt the worth of kindness, look to the bread you've shared. That is where I'll be. Clara May Whitlock." Moved by her words, the town decided to build something lasting in her memory, a small cabin by the river with a big wooden table inside. They called it Clara's Table. Anyone who came hungry could eat there, free of charge. Eli grew up to run it, with help from Anna and the children she taught. They baked bread from her same recipe, the one written from memory, because Clara never wrote it down. But somehow, it always came out just right. 10 years passed. The world had changed, but Hollow Bend hadn't forgotten. The soup house by the river had become the heart of the town, its doors always open, its bread always warm. One autumn morning, a gray-haired traveler rode into town. He was older now, face lined, eyes softer than before. It was Mr. Brooks, the man who once came hungry and left redeemed. He dismounted and entered Clara's table. Children were laughing as they served soup. Anna Briggs, now older too, stood behind the counter. He placed a warm loaf of bread on the table. "Baked it myself," he said quietly, "for Clara." Anna smiled, eyes glistening. "She's still here, you know. Every time someone's fed, she's here." The man looked out the window at the river bend. Wildflowers grew thick over the place where her cabin once stood, their petals swaying like whispers of gratitude. And in that hush of wind and sunlight, he could almost hear her voice again. "Don't forget to smile, stranger." He did. For the first time in years he smiled. A simple, genuine, grateful smile.